Hey folks, Jim McCallum here with Our Hometown. We have a great show for you here today. I'm here at the M.H. Rourke Stadium of West Brunswick High School. We're going to talk with Brett Hickman and his father Yogi Hickman, both of whom are and were coaches here at Brunswick High School, West Brunswick High School. So stay tuned for that. We also have a short episode on Leland Under the Lights. We'll show you that, and we hope you'll stay tuned for more of Our Hometown. Thanks. We're here at West Brunswick High School. Your viewers will recognize the Rourke Stadium just behind us. My guests are Coach Yogi Hickman and Coach Brett Hickman, who just happens to be his son, and we're going to talk about West Brunswick High School football. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Coach Yogi, I want to start with you because you established a real tradition of football back in the 90s here at West Brunswick High School. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I was real fortunate to come in into a good situation here where football was really important, and I came in behind the two state championship teams,
right,
and inherited some really good players, and had some success over my 6 years as a head coach, primarily attributed to those really good players.
Well, it helps to have talent, but coaching can make a difference too. You won 10 conference championships, am I right?
Yes, between here and my prior job up at St. Paul's.
Right. You've had a chance to see football all through the years. How's it changing, or how's it changed?
Well, probably the way offenses attack now is just worlds different. And Brett likes to say I like to play the game in a box when I was coaching, and I did. You know, primarily we wanted to run in between the tackles or off tackle, and now hardly anybody does that. You know, the game is played sideline to sideline and end to end much more now.
Are the players bigger? They're in better physical conditioning, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think that they are. I think that from, you know, I go all the way back to the 70s when I played and how big our people were or weren't, as the case may be.
Yeah. Right.
And so certainly they're bigger, faster, and stronger. And again, that's weights, weightlifting that factors into that as well.
Right. Coach Brett, you played quarterback.
Not very well, but I did.
But you're not a big guy.
No, I'm not.
A lot of the quarterbacks now are 6'3", 6'4", and bigger than that.
Yeah, you know, the good Lord chose to, I guess, to give me the genes that I had. My oldest brother got every bit of height that we had in our family. He's 6'2", and me and my little brother are standing somewhere a little bit between our dad. I think Dad's 5'9", I'm 5'8", Sam's about 5'10"-ish. So, you know, but with what we were doing offensively when I was playing for Coach Fletcher, you know, height was not at a premium. You know, it was a lot more about decision making and being able to run the option and get your offense in the right place. So as a high school player, I didn't think my height put much of a ceiling on me, but it certainly didn't make me a very attractive prospect.
So our viewers will know you were a quarterback here from 2000 to 2003.
Right.
And then you went
to school at East Carolina and
got into coaching soon thereafter.
I did, really thanks to my dad's connections as a longtime high school football coach in the state of North Carolina. I got hooked up in while I was an undergrad at East Carolina thanks to a legendary North Carolina high school coach named Harold Robinson, who had won a couple of state championships at Williamston. And Coach Robinson just happened to be on the staff as the director of high school relations at East Carolina. So I spent a year really kind of getting my foot in the door with him and our graduate assistants that were there at the time. And as my time progressed there, got increasingly more involved with the defensive staff while I was at East Carolina. And you know, I guess those 2 or 3 years really were formidable in my coaching career because they led me on to a path of 9 years as a full-time college coach after I got done with school.
And then,
there.
Of course, you're back here at West Brunswick for your first year.
First year head coach, and you know, a little bit different transitioning back to high school with the pace of which you can practice at and what you can teach at. But would not have left college football for just any job. I was going to take a high school job where I thought the pieces were in place to be successful, and I think they are here.
And this is home, of course.
And then that's the biggest thing, is I have a chance to bring your wife back here who's not from here, but to bring our child back around his grandparents and aunts and uncles and his cousins. That was a big part of this.
We already talked about the physical side and the fact that the kids are bigger and stronger, but let's talk about, well, I don't want to call it the academic side, but the side that requires these kids to know a lot about football.
It is. You know, things have changed. One thing that's really changed is just the technology and your access to things. I mean, there's a software that every high school program in the country is using called Huddle. You know, our kids are able to watch more film. They're able to assess and dissect whatever you can give them pretty easily. They can do it on their own at home. And obviously, you know, we don't go straight to practice after school like they did for many years here. I mean, we're diving in and trying to add, you know, the collegiate aspect of studying the game and improving from a meeting standpoint, and then taking that classroom out to the practice field to produce a good football team.
How many plays, for example, do you ask your offensive players to know?
I think the biggest thing is, Jim, you try and teach in terms of concept as opposed to plays, and you might look at a call sheet and say, well, you have this many plays, but in reality, anything that's sort of like this, it might be 4 or 5 concepts for the offensive line, and the changeup might be, you know, the fullback on this play, or it might be the wide receiver on this play. So really we carry in about 6 run concepts a week and about 5 pass concepts a week, because there's only so much mentally that the young people can handle. You know, to me, you've got to get good at something.
Right.
And you know, I told a couple of guys I worked with in college, you know, they would be embarrassed by how small our call sheet was. Last week versus Whiteville on defense, we played the game in 1 or 2 coverages and played great defensively. It's not necessarily what you do, it's how well you can execute what you're asking them to do.
Right. Fellas, I'm jumping around on you, but Yogi, tell our viewers what it's like to have your son here as a coach.
Well, obviously there's a great sense of pride that he's been in his own little world for a decade now, and he's decided to come back, and so his mom and I are very proud of what he's accomplished, and she is very glad. His mom is very glad that he's back.
I'm sure.
So she can play with Henry, our 3-year-old grandson.
Right.
And personally, you know, I guess we've known Brett's going to be a coach since he was 2 years old, 3 years old, really. I mean, all the pictures we have on the sidelines, he used to haul my wires around back in the days before we had wireless communication. And it's pretty neat. It really is. It's like a full circle. You know, because I've in one way or another been around for 20 years now, I guess. And he's gone for 10 years, and now he's come back full circle. And my contribution, as it were, to work for him is really pretty neat.
It's got to be very rewarding.
It is, and
yeah.
You know, I just try not to get in the way. I try to try to answer questions when they're asked.
Yeah.
But you know, it's his show, and we're just there to help.
Well, it's his show, and I want to ask him another question or two. It's not a new concept, but I've heard you say that defense and special teams wins ball games.
It sure does. I mean, they had a saying around here back in the 90s that we were going to play Yogi ball, and I don't know if we're doing that quite yet, but I do want to build a football program that prides itself on being really good at the line of scrimmage and being able to run the football and stop the run defensively, and you know, upset me a little bit to lose that game because of the inability to run the football and making a couple of key special teams mistakes on Friday night against Whiteville. So you know, I got my football philosophy very honestly. You know, and that's the one thing I can say from growing up around Dad's programs and then working for the guys that I worked for at the college level, and Skip Holtz and Jamie Chadwell and Carol McRae, that you know, there's new ways to adapt to doing things, but you know, as much as football's changed, a lot of it stayed the same, and a lot of it's won with
fundamentals, I'm sure.
With fundamentals and blocking and tackling and being sound in the kicking game, and that's not going to change as long as we strap up helmets and we play.
Yeah. Do you have players playing both ways?
We're pretty fortunate right now. We have about 15 or 16 kids who practice both ways, but as far as starters on each side of the ball, right now Trey Bell is our only kid. He starts at slot receiver and he plays free safety. Now we lean on DeAndre Clariday quite a bit as a running back and a safety. What we did when we decided when we were going to get this job is I wanted to look at the numbers, but I really wanted to put our best players on defense first, and that frustrates offensive coaches to no end, and
sure.
I get all that, but you know, in my opinion, really in the last 20 years, this program has been defined by a lot of near misses because, at least in the last 10 years, with the inability to play championship level defense. And you know, I believe in our offensive staff, Coach Wood, Coach Vassy, Coach Fletcher, Coach Dunn. I believe that they're going to be able to find ways to manufacture 21 to 24 points a game. But we're not going to sacrifice, we're not going to give up 40 points a game with our best players not sitting on defense.
You play in a tough conference. What's the rest of the season look like, Coach?
You know, I think the biggest thing is, Jim, what we have to do to get better. We have good enough talent to have winning seasons right now.
Good.
You know, we've got a team that can manufacture 5 or 6 wins on talent alone, in my opinion. Pending health.
And the key is those few extra wins.
It is, but you know, you play teams like Whiteville, you play North Myrtle Beach, or the Hoggards and the Hanovers of the world. Our execution has to improve if we want to take this program to a level beyond 6, 7 wins and the first or second round of the playoffs. And it's been a while since West Brunswick's practice on Thanksgiving Day. I think it's 1995, I think, is what we figured out.
Now, just so our viewers will know, that if you're practicing on Thanksgiving Day, you're in the playoffs.
You're in the late in the playoffs.
Oh, late,
you're
okay.
in the 3rd or 4th round.
All
so, you know, to me, where it has transitioned from even Coach Fletcher's best teams, I think he made the 3rd round maybe twice, one of them being my senior year, and the teams that Dad had, you know, there's usually something that's separating the teams that are going 8-4 or 7-5 or whatever it is,
right,
amongst the teams that are winning 10 or 11 games every year. And you know, I'm proud of our kids. I'm proud of the culture that we're establishing, but our execution has to improve because we're going to line up, and Whiteville's only going to continue to get better with their staff. North Myrtle Beach has obviously built a very powerful program right across the state line, and we know what Hoggard and Hanover are, and we know what Laney is on most years, and so on and so on, not to leave anybody out. And of course, you know, you know when you strap it up against South and North that you're going to get in a rivalry game.
Absolutely.
Anything can happen in those games, and Rocky's doing a good job over there, and Brian Davis is only going to continue to get that program better and better and better. So
that's at North Brunswick.
Yeah, we're just not in a situation where, you know, you can't just turn it on Fridays.
Every game's competitive.
Yeah, every game's going to be competitive, and to have that competitive spirit every Friday night is hard, but you know, where we've got to gain another level is we've got to execute much better in practice to prepare ourselves for that level on Friday nights.
Yeah, practice well, you play well.
That's right.
Yeah.
We used the grant funds to purchase 2 ventilation saws. It's a souped-up chainsaw, and it makes cutting a hole a lot quicker. With an axe, it'll take several minutes. With a chainsaw, it is like a 1 to 2 minute ordeal. And that way a victim has as good a chance as we can give them to survive. It's very competitive for the fire department to get money. It is very competitive and it is hard. And ATMC joins with other charities and nonprofits to make sure people get what they need. ATMC was started in 1955 to take care of the communication needs And this is just one more step in how they help this, this county.
We're early in the season, Coach. I know your first game, you fellows fell behind at halftime.
We did.
And you came back for a great victory. I want to know, what did you tell these players at halftime?
Sometimes that stuff's kind of overrated. I think, you know, a lot of times you see Hollywood movies and somebody goes in there and they kind of fires them up. The biggest thing we had to do in the Soxty game, we had to get them calmed down.
Okay.
We weren't playing very well, and particularly on defense, we might have been a little too amped up and had to settle them down and get them back to fundamentals and get them back to being able to play some of our base calls and coverages that we did. And that was, you know, I thought what we did in the second half was our young men did what we asked them to do during the week much better in the second half than they did the first half. And offensively, obviously, got a little bit of a run game going that kept our defense off the field and able to get successful. So, you know, to our kids' credit, both games so far, they've been really sharp coming out of halftime. And that goes on assistant coaches and players.
Conditioning have an effect?
I think so. I do think our kids have investment to lean back on. Since we got here in March, we have been full speed ahead with our varsity football team on training the body, training the mind, training the spirit. And, you know, we had, of our 46 kids on the varsity roster, 39 of them were here 85 to 90% of the time in the summer.
That's great.
So what you see is, I think you see a conditioned football team. I think you see a mentally tough football team. I've had no qualms, Jim, with our competitive spirit and how hard they've played on Friday night. I think we're really learning how to lean back on that investment. That
it is an investment. Isn't it?
You build your culture, in my opinion, from the end of the season until August the 1st.
And in fact, you're building for the years to come.
That's exactly right. And
5, 10 years down the road.
That's exactly right. And our kids are doing a really good job, and they understand you only get 11 opportunities. So very pleased with the effort. The execution's not always there, but that's going to come with time, and it's going to come with repetition.
I'm going to glance at my notes and know that you have an LPDTT.
That's right.
I want our viewers to know about that. It's important.
It's a funny story. So I was 26 years old, and I was the defense coordinator at North Greenville University. And I was one of the youngest coordinators in the country, and our head coach left to take the job at Gardner-Webb, and I ended up going with him. But in that process, they had actually asked me to interview maybe for the head coaching job, and I'm a man of a deep faith, and you know, I sat on it and I thought about it, and like, 26 years old, are you really ready for this? And what came out of that was what we call the Plan to Win, which is about a 90 to 110 page binder of how we're going to run a program from A to Z. At that point, it was geared toward the college level. Now it's certainly geared toward being successful at the high school level. And what I've been a avid reader. Dad can probably tell you this my whole life, and you know, I think people are really successful because they have core values to lean back on. And what I started doing that night is I just started, okay, what do you want your program to be about one day? And you know, certainly I am my father's son, and I thought, you know, why Dad was so successful is a connection with players. And to me, those first two, the L and the P, are love and passion. You know,
right.
care about them, love them. Everything's about the young men, and the discipline that you have to build. That being the third core value that we have. And then the last two, toughness. This game isn't for everybody. It's the hardest sport in the world, in my opinion. And one guy can't win a game. Two guys can't win a game. It takes everybody doing their 1/11th on every play.
That's togetherness.
That's togetherness is a byproduct of love, passion, discipline, and then the toughness, because these kids are innately tough because they're choosing to do something.
Sure.
I mean, it's 90 degrees out here, and those kids are going to put on 25 pounds of pads when they come out here in an hour or two. So, yeah, it takes a special person, and to lean on that connection that you can get through those 5 core values, and it's on everything we do. It's on my arm right now. It's on our undershirts. It's on everything in that locker room right now, and lean on those core values, especially when things get tough.
Coach, and this perhaps is for either one of you, you have a great school and you have a great athletic director and you have great support here in the community. We couldn't conclude this interview without talking about support from the school and community.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we moved down here 24 years ago, Dad's right. You know, it was a strong football culture. A lot of that was harnessed by what Coach Marshall C had built in the 80s, and then obviously
right.
Coach Brett had taken over. And you know, Dad was a product of, he was hired by a great educator and a member of our Board of Education, Ed Lemon, and Mr.
Right.
Lemon was always incredibly supportive of athletics as a whole, understanding the value of football. I'm not sure, I can't attest to it because I haven't been here over the course of the last 10 or 15 years. What I do know is that we have a principal who cares deeply about this community and the school in Rhonda Benton.
Right.
And we have an athletic director who is the longest tenured head football coach in this program's history. So there's an investment right now that they wanted to bring somebody back who had the same amount of passion for this community. And I'll be honest, I did think I was the right hire because of both my ties to the 90s and who my father was, but also kind of understanding why we haven't been at that level over the course of the last 15, 20 years and being a kind of a notch below the Hoggards and the Hanovers of the world. So I would rank this community above anybody that I've recruited. I mean, we have not asked for anything that we have not gotten, that we have not received from people in this community, from our principal, and you know, there's not a better athletic director from sitting in my chair right now who's been in that situation.
Coach Fletcher just does a great job.
He really does, and I do think there's obviously an emotional connection for him. You know, he wants to see this work as bad as I want it to work.
Absolutely.
You know, because of my past of playing for him, and you know, I think as much in terms of they had moments of success with him, but was the infrastructure really in place to make him as successful as I think he could have been? And you know, to me, a lot of the things that have happened in this program over the course of the last 20 years were our coaches were being forced to fight an uphill battle, and he has made sure to him and Miss Benton's credit that is not going to happen to me.
I want to thank you, gentlemen, for being with us. It's a great story. Coach Yogi, thank you, sir. Coach Brett, thank you, sir. Good luck for the rest of the season.
Thank you very much.
First of all, I do want to thank ATMC for being so involved in the community, and especially that you have some in leadership that understand FFA and all that it can provide for our students. And I know from when I have gotten awards, being there and having some of the gentlemen that's up talking tell about their experiences, you know, 50 years ago in the FFA and what they learned from it, and so they understand what you can get out of the FFA. You know, it's really nice, like this one, to get the jackets. We have kids that can't afford that jacket, you know, and so that would mean that they couldn't do certain competitions or compete in certain areas. And by providing this bundle of jackets that we're going to be able to get, we're going to have the jackets on hand so that if we have a student in that situation, we'll be able to loan them a jacket so that they can go do this competition. So it means a lot to us that ATMC is so community friendly.
Some people come here for the beach, some of us are raised here, and I think the best thing about being around here in North Carolina is that in the FFA is that we have all the farms and stuff like that, so we get a lot of hands-on experience.
It's our 15th year of the Leland Under the Lights car show. It helps support the chamber, but it also helps with our education, that we give away a scholarship for a graduating senior each year at North Brunswick High School. Oh, I mean, this is the best year we've ever had. We had almost 200 cars. We've had probably over 2,500, 3,000 people come through here to see the cars.
saw the car for the first time when I was at work one day. Somebody was in showing it off to his buddy. I looked at it, said 1973 Challenger, R8. Do you want to sell it? The guy said, no, it's my baby. I gave him a card I had, said, call me when you're ready. About 2 years later, he called me up and said, I'm selling the car, my wife went and got pregnant. The body was in this condition, but it needed the harnesses, all the wiring harnesses were shot. Transmission wasn't working quite right, and the rear end was the wrong rear in it. It was doing 7,000 RPMs at 40 miles an hour. We take it, my wife and I go for a ride. The air conditioning's not in it, so you only go for a ride in the cool evenings. It's a little too hot to ride in the normal summer.
A 1928 Ford Model A closed cab pickup truck. It was my grandfather's truck. He had it for about a decade. It was the year he was born. He always wanted one the year he was born, and after my grandmother died, he was fortunate enough to acquire it. Me and my 7-year-old, we ride in it all the time. A couple days a week, we go riding around the neighborhood. My hope is to pass it down to one of my children one day after I die.
It's a 66 Nova Chevy 2, 350 small block, but hyped up. And got it all the way from Honolulu. I had a lot of rebuilding the engine, took every piece of molding off, replaced it, every screw and bolt done by hand, and try to get it like showroom, the best that I could. I'm still working on it, and it's not over yet.
It's a 1970 Pontiac GTO. I bought the car in 1990, just after I finished high school. It was kind of a dream of mine to have a muscle car. Obviously, coming out of high school, you know, cars were a big thing in my life. It was obviously busy time in my life. You like to believe you want to jump right on the car and get things done. With college coming up, I didn't really have a whole lot of time getting off to college. So the car, honestly, I got really aggressive in taking it down, you know, tearing it all apart, but it really sat in pieces in my parents' basement for probably another 10 years. And then finally, after I had kids, you know, I started thinking, okay, you know, into my career a little bit more, wanted to go ahead and finally get to my car that I kind of always dreamed of finishing. And at that time, kind of invested the time and money into sort of finishing it off and bringing it to what I had once, you know, hoped to have it to be. It has a lot of sentimental value, obviously. You know, as a car that my very first muscle car, one that probably don't ever plan on selling, because every story I ever hear is, I used to have one of these cars, I sold it, I wish I could get it back. You know, I really love events like Leland Under the Lights. Great program or great setup that they do for people in the Leland area to just come out and enjoy the car show, and a good time to meet new people and other people with like interests.
We'd like to thank our sponsors. You know, we love the flyover, the drone flyover from ATMC. We like our sponsors. You know, our dash pack sponsors was Shucking Shack of Leland. BEMC was our t-shirt sponsor. And so we couldn't do it without them, especially with ATMC.
Our next award.
Folks, thanks for being with us on Our Hometown. If you have a show that you'd like to recommend for our consideration, please be in touch with us at atmctv.com. Thanks again. See you next month on Our Hometown.
Stay connected with your community channel. Like ATMC TV on Facebook today.